There was a morning last spring when I couldn't read my own handwriting. Not because it was sloppy. I've always had poor handwriting. Ask anyone who knew me. But I was sitting at the kitchen table looking at a grocery list I'd written the night before, and the letters just sat there, like they were waiting for something. I moved the paper closer, then farther. Then I got up and opened the blinds wider to let more light in. That's when it hit me. I'd been doing that for months. Moving things, adjusting lights, sitting closer to the television, holding menus at arm's length at the diner, then squinting when I brought them in. I told myself it was the lighting in restaurants. I told myself it was the small font on my phone. I told myself a lot of things. At 82, you get good at that, explaining things away. Adapting so gradually you don't notice the adaptation anymore. But that morning with the grocery list, I couldn't explain it away. My own handwriting. I know what my handwriting looks like. And something had shifted, quietly, somewhere along the line. And I hadn't noticed because I'd been too busy adjusting to notice. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't scared. I sat there for a while with the paper in my hand. I thought about my wife, Margaret. She passed 11 years ago now. But I thought about the last year she was alive, how she used to sit by the window in the afternoon and do word puzzles. She had macular problems, not terrible, but enough. Enough that she'd come to the dinner table some evenings and not mention that she could barely make out my face across from her. She didn't want to worry me, she said. I found that out later. Much later. I didn't want to become that. Not the not seeing part. The pretending part. So I went to my eye doctor. Decent man, been seeing him for years. He told me what he told me. Nothing dramatic. Normal aging. A few things to keep an eye on, pardon the expression. He adjusted my prescription. Told me to come back in 6 months. I walked out of his office feeling a little better, and I drove home. And I sat in my chair and thought about what he'd said about lifestyle habits. He mentioned it almost as an aside, the way doctors do when they're running behind. Screen time, sunlight, sleep, the usual. He said it matters more than people think. I didn't do anything with that for a few weeks. That's honest. Then, sometime in March, I had coffee with my neighbor Earl. Earl's a few years younger than me, pushing 76. Sharp fellow. Retired high school principal. We meet Tuesday mornings at his kitchen table. Been doing it since his wife suggested it back when Margaret was still alive. The four of us used to play cards. Now it's just Earl and me, drinking bad coffee and mostly not talking about that. I mentioned the eye thing. I wasn't looking for advice, I just mentioned it. Earl nodded and said, I started doing something about a year ago. Probably nothing, but I'll tell you what it is. He told me he'd read something, or someone had told him, I can't remember which. Every night before bed, he chewed a small handful of pumpkin seeds, just raw ones. Not roasted, not salted, just the plain seeds. I looked at him over my coffee cup. Pumpkin seeds. He shrugged. I can't tell you they do anything. My eye doctor doesn't know I'm doing it. I'm not saying they fixed anything. I'm saying I started paying attention at the same time, and things seemed to hold steady. Now, I want to be clear about something. I am not a doctor. Earl is not a doctor. And I know what it sounds like when someone tells you a single food fixed their health problems. I've heard those stories my whole life, and most of them don't hold up to scrutiny. So I'm not telling you pumpkin seeds are medicine. I don't know that. I can't know that. But here's what I know about Earl. He's not a foolish man. And something about the way he said it, quiet, matter of fact, made me take it differently than I might have from someone else. I started that same week. But I also started something else, and I think this is the part that actually matters. I started paying attention. I've been letting my evenings drift for years, After dinner, television until I fell asleep in the chair. Get up, go to bed properly, wake up too early, stare at the ceiling, drink coffee, repeat. I wasn't neglecting myself exactly, but I wasn't paying any particular attention to myself either. Starting those seeds gave me a small thing to do before bed. It sounds ridiculous, I realize that, but having a small, intentional thing in an evening that's mostly just time passing, it changed the texture of the evening slightly. I sat at the table. I chewed the seeds slowly. I drank a glass of water. That was it. And because I was sitting quietly instead of half asleep in front of the television, I started noticing other things. I'd been letting the screen be the last thing my eyes did before sleep for years. Bright, flickering, close. That probably wasn't helping. I started turning it off earlier. Started reading instead, with a proper lamp, not squinting at something arm's length away. I started going to bed a little earlier, getting better sleep, real sleep, the kind where you wake up and something feels rested instead of just less tired. I'd forgotten what that felt like. I think a lot of people my age have. You start accepting the poor sleep as part of the deal, the same way you accept the stiff back and the cold feet. It becomes the baseline without you ever agreeing it should be. I started taking my evening walk more seriously. I'd been walking for years, but I'd let it become perfunctory. Same route, same pace, barely looking around. I started stopping more, looking at things properly. The garden on the corner of Elm and 3rd. The way light comes through trees in the late afternoon. I'd forgotten I was capable of just looking at something without a reason. I also started doing something I hadn't done in years, going through old photographs. I have a shoebox on the shelf in the bedroom, the kind of thing you move from house to house and never open. I opened it, sat with it one evening, looked at photos of Margaret Young, photos of the kids before they were the ages I've known them longest, photos of my father who died before I turned 40, faces I love that I'd been keeping in a box. That probably has nothing to do with eyesight, but it had something to do with not letting my eyes rest on things that mattered. I'd stopped looking at things carefully. Looking had become functional. You looked across the street safely. You looked to not spill something, not to see. Not because there was something worth the attention. By summer, I noticed something. I was on my porch with a newspaper, early morning, and I read through most of the front section without adjusting the light once. I didn't move the paper, didn't squint, I just read it. Now, did the pumpkin seeds do that? Did sleeping better do that? Did getting a new prescription do that? Did turning off the television earlier do that? The walks? The water? I genuinely do not know. My eye doctor, when I told him at my 6-month appointment that things seemed a bit better, he said that can happen with a corrected prescription and reduced eye strain. He said, keep doing whatever you're doing. He didn't mention pumpkin seeds because I didn't mention them. I'm telling you all this honestly because I think the honest version is more useful than a simple story. I used to think eyesight was something that declined on a track. You got older, things got worse, and eventually you needed bigger glasses or more help. I thought it was passive, happening to you. I didn't understand how much of it was about daily decisions I was making without realizing I was making decisions. The screen in the dark, the bad sleep, the habit of not looking at anything carefully because what was there to look at? The same house, the same street, the same routine. Margaret had a phrase she used when the grandchildren were small and not eating their vegetables. You'll understand when you're older. They rolled their eyes the way children do. She was right, of course. I wish I'd understood sooner that eyes aren't different from the rest of you. They're part of the same system. They respond to the same things. Rest, attention, decent habits, not punishing yourself unnecessarily. There's no dramatic cure. There's no single seed that fixes what decades of neglect or inattention begins. But there are small daily decisions that either slowly exhaust the body or slowly, quietly support it. And those decisions feel trivial right up until they aren't. I'll tell you a thing that stays with me. Last November, my granddaughter Rosie was visiting. She's 7 now. She's got Margaret's coloring and her grandmother's impatience, which is something to see. She was in the backyard and she found a caterpillar on one of the fence posts, and she came running in to get me. "Come see, come see." So I walked out with her and crouched down, and we looked at this caterpillar together for a good 3 or 4 minutes. The way the segments moved, the color on it. I could see it clearly. That small thing in clear detail. I don't know if that sounds like much, but I am 82 years old, and I spent the better part of a year quietly afraid of what was happening to my eyes. And I was crouched in the backyard with my granddaughter, looking at something neither of us had any reason to look at, and I could see it. I was grateful in a way I wouldn't have known how to feel a year before. Maybe that's what I want to say, underneath everything else. We're often not grateful for things until they become uncertain. Eyesight, hearing, a night of decent sleep. The ability to read something without moving it around in the light. I can't tell you pumpkin seeds will help you. I can tell you that a small habit gave me a small anchor, and the anchor led to better attention, and better attention led to better sleep, and fewer screens, and more walks, and more noticing. And all of that together seemed to help. That's the most honest version I have. Go see your eye doctor. That's not negotiable. That comes first. But don't only see your doctor. Pay attention to the things in between appointments. The small daily decisions that don't feel like decisions. They add up. In both directions. The caterpillar's probably long gone now. Rosie's already forgotten it. But I haven't.